What's up, Capoeira Nation? Welcome back to the Capoeira Experience podcast. Thank you so much for coming back. Thank you so much for listening to the Capoeira podcast. And it's very exciting to see the audience growing and you guys learning. I actually got a lot of feedback from our previous episode with Pardal, and then it was really cool to see people being like, "Oh, I didn't know we can do this kind of stuff." And then record it this way, and it's cool to see people actually paying attention to this stuff, and because it's very important for us as athletes, and we as a capoeiristas we move totally different as any other martial art and any other sports. So today is a very special episode because we'll have somebody very professional outside of capoeira, which is going to give us a lot of really cool information and a lot of really cool help for us to grow in capoeira, to prevent injuries, and especially for those ladies that, and just in general, but also for the ladies that get pregnant and they want to come back to capoeira and then get a little bit probably wondering how they can get back, what they need to do, and things like that. So they are both professionals, and I already have my friend Pardal here. But let me introduce you. Please, let me introduce you to Doctora Julia and Pardal. Well, Doctor Ceda, but A.K.A Pardal. How are you guys doing?
Good. How are you doing?
Good. Awesome. Very happy to have you guys here. How are you doing, Pardal?
It's great to be back. It was after the first episode, like you mentioned, I was able to actually connect with a lot of other capoeira groups here in New York in particular who listened to the episode and were like, oh, I didn't know that you trained with this group, and it's like small world. I'm like right here.
That's so cool, man.
Yeah. Actually, I think it was Capoeira Brazil here in New York.
New York, Joy?
Yeah.
Oh, nice. I'm actually having her in a couple of weeks.
Yeah, I mean, I've heard great things about her group from people that I know who've trained with her. They say she's incredible, so I can't imagine
totally
what it's gonna be like.
Oh man, he's super fun to play with her. Julia, what do you think about capoeira as a professional outside of capoeira?
Well, it's a beautiful sport. I think it's really, what I love about it as like an outsider looking in is how much people outside of Brazil and non-Brazilian people start to embrace Brazilian culture when they do it. So they start to learn Portuguese, they like learn to play Brazilian music, and that part of it is really exciting to me. But then also from an athleticism standpoint, it's basically dancing, but it's also like extremely gymnastics rooted and very athletic. So as a person who has spent a lot of my career working with dancers, it's definitely like an area of interest and something that's cool for me to watch.
That's so cool. It's cool to see also like the perspective of somebody that doesn't do capoeira and be like, that's cool. And professional, because I didn't know that your part is like with dancers and athletes, is things like that. That's awesome. That's so cool. Yeah. So Julia, tell us a little bit about your background and your career and everything like that, so people can get to know you a little bit.
Totally. So I started out, I went to physical therapy school, and my first job outside of physical therapy school was in a setting where I was working with professional and recreational dancers. So
cool.
It was a lot of sports medicine, a lot of backstage coverage, and a lot of just like movement specialty, because those people are working at like a really high level, and trying to get them to stay on stage if they're currently in a run, or to rehab in between shows if they are dealing with a more significant injury. And from that place, I ended up, I had already had an interest in pelvic floor physical therapy. And while I was in that setting, I ended up treating pelvic floor dysfunction in dancers, because a lot of pelvic floor dysfunction happens in athletic people who have never actually had babies. So it's really an important population to get that kind of care. And then I left to go specialize more specifically in pelvic floor physical therapy, which I did for a couple of years. And now I started my own practice in Brooklyn, where I treat a variety of athletes, fitness enthusiasts
So
who
cool.
are working regular jobs
Yeah.
and people with pelvic floor dysfunction. So, and like the intersections between those things.
Hey, Capoeira Nation, I'm very happy to announce our workshop with Fosmanda Coruja, or also known as a Fosmanda Joy, all the way from New York on May 14th here in Indianapolis, hosted by us here in the Capoeira Brazil, Indianapolis. And this is going to be a 2 hours full of Capoeira. The first hour is going to be full class with Fosmanda Joy. And we are going to have right after that a full hour of Hada, or full hour of us moving, connecting, and playing as much as you want and as much as we can. The early bird is going to end 1 month before the workshop, okay? Make sure you register, click the link below, and come join us on May 14th, 2022 for this amazing workshop with Fosmanda Coruja. Is the public there for the type of things that you do that you get a lot of people there?
Yeah, it's what's fun about what I do now is that I get a whole mix of people. So I get people who are, fairly elite level athletes dealing with either a chronic, like a long-term problem, or a new injury. I get people who have pelvic floor dysfunction of various kinds, whether it's, pain with sexual intercourse, pain in the genital area, or difficulty with leaking and stuff like that. So
Okay.
I work with a huge variety of people, which is fun.
Okay, cool. And then you mentioned something about like movement things, movement and everything like that. This is probably I'm not sure if you've probably seen it, but what do you think about Ido Portal? Have you seen things like him, like what he does?
I think, is that one of the people Jordan sent me a video of? Did you send me that video?
Probably, because he
he
loves capoeira, and he basically has been like, I'm not doing anything in a linear fashion. Like, he'll do the weirdest variations of a squat, like single arm push-ups, like basically any multiplanar movement on unstable surfaces while balancing multiple. It's like stimulation of like cognition. He integrates it all in his movement practice. It's pretty bizarre if you're not familiar with it, but it's incredible. It's incredible.
I mean, I think that's a person who's functioning at a super high level. Like, if you're gonna integrate all of those different things at the same time, then you better be really good at single planes and stable surfaces and all of the lead up to that before you start taking it and making it your own, so that you don't end up, not being able to continue doing that.
and teaching it, because he has a huge following, huge following, and it's amazing how just like all the research he does, and he just passed that, and he helped many people to prevent injuries and recover from injuries too.
It's great.
Yeah.
I mean, I think from a like a rehab perspective, the more you can get the brain involved in things, the more people are going to learn from it. So, I don't really use capoeira in my rehab style. I use, one of my favorite things to use, honestly, is kettlebells. So I use multiplanar stuff with that all the time, so that people can, or I make them like do sequences where I'm like yelling out what they're going to do next.
Okay.
So they have to like respond versus being able to anticipate what's coming.
I love that. Okay.
Those are sort of like similar ideas.
Nice. I love that. We'll touch base back on that, on the anticipation point. I really love that, especially for classes and the reactive mind in capoeira. You have to have that. Yeah. Pardal, tell us a little bit about the background. I know we went through the last episode, but tell us a little bit.
Yeah, so I've been focusing my attention more recently on working with capoeiristas after I've been training here in New York with Capoeira Guatambu, and realizing that there's so many people in my class were asking me for rehab advice, and then you had that moment where I like, who's helping these people? But even before that, I have a background in I used to be a power lifter for a while, so I was spending a lot of time just doing like squats, bench, deadlift. I used to be a salsa dancer. I used to play
Nice.
American football, so I have a decent amount of movement variety in my repertoire. And sometimes I still get the barbell athlete, so people who do CrossFit, people who do
Yeah.
powerlifting. So I use my strength and conditioning knowledge to work with that population. But
Nice.
now I'm trying to take that into the not the Hoda per se, but
Yeah.
into to capoeiristas who may think that all they need to do is stretch in order to kick high and to do a good au and a beautiful floreo when flexibility is only like a small microcosm of human performance and actually probably one of the least important in terms of durability
That's crazy, man.
and performance. So I'm trying to change the narrative of, oh, I got hurt. Let me just grab some ice. Or I know I just
Yeah.
need to stretch more in order to throw a good martello. It's like, no. And now what I'm doing is I have capoeiristas on programs where week to week I give them exercises that change to challenge their mobility, challenge their resiliency, and it makes them more sustainable as long as they're on a program. They can run things by me, which is great because I speak. Like, for example, I was talking to a capoeirista from another group the other day. And he's like, yeah, like when I transitioned from esquiva to a negativa to jole, he's like, nobody knows what I'm talking about, but you do.
Yeah.
And he
Yeah.
just, yeah, so now I can actually program stuff like that. Like, oh,
Yeah.
like troca negativa, jole, and it's
Yeah.
pretty cool.
Yeah. Yeah. And those transitions, especially like a lot of people I heard from many capoeiristas that they say like my knee just like keeps cracking and he has that like cracking sound in the knees and he's just like, well, man, I don't know what to tell you. I'm not professional on
Yeah. For us, I could just say it's the wood floor, maybe.
that.
But I hear a lot of cracking knees. But cracking knees is an example of something that you don't necessarily have to be concerned with, unless it's particularly painful and limiting your range of
Good
motion
point.
or mobility. It's just a relatively normal occurrence usually after a series of inactivity. But after you do a couple of them, you start to get some fluid circulation in the joint, and you probably won't get as much cracking.
Nice. Nice. And then, Julia, I forgot to ask you social media so people can follow you and they can see your work because you have really cool content in there too.
Thanks. My social media, my Instagram is at Empower Physical Therapy with underscores. So empower underscore physical underscore therapy.
Nice.
So you can find me on Instagram. You can find me on Facebook, also Empower Physical Therapy. And I try to be on Twitter, but I'm not very good at it. So Instagram is probably your best bet.
Nice, nice. Do you have like any sort of like programs there that people can subscribe or things like that?
Right now, no, I do mostly one-on-ones,
Okay.
virtual. I do virtuals and I
Oh,
also
cool.
do in person.
Oh, cool. Well, reach
So
out there
my
to Julia. Yeah.
yeah, my contact link is also there, so you can contact me through my website on my Instagram.
Nice, nice. Go there, check it out, and definitely practice those things that we are going to go through the podcast. Pardal, what about you? Your social media so people can follow you and see you there. Which you also have really cool content there.
Muito obrigado, irmão. I am doctor, so Dr. Jordan Seda. Just like last time, Ceda means silk in Spanish. Fun
It's very
fact out there. They did used to call me J Smooth back in the day. That's not a lie.
Yes, Ruth.
I'm totally serious. I'm serious. My brother can vouch for me on that.
Oh my God, so
that's the
funny.
thing. So I'm on
You have a
Instagram.
twin. I forgot about
I
that.
do, yeah. Which I found out last night he's the more fun one, but that's for another episode. But anyway, I'm Dr. Jordan Seda on Instagram and TikTok. My website, www.theabstractphysio.com. And yeah, pretty much Instagram, I'm always on there.
Nice.
So DM me. Like I've been posting daily capoeira content. Minus yesterday, I took yesterday off, but I put like punch specific, negativa specific, quechada specific, and I'm really trying to narrow it down. So any capoeirista that goes to my page and be like, there is something for me on here.
Nice, nice. That's awesome. And you offer programs there too, right?
Oh, absolutely.
Nice,
Absolutely.
nice. What kind of programs do you offer there for people to also subscribe to those?
Well, I have my monthly membership program. It's just one click, set up a call with me. I either do in-person or virtual analyses of movement. And basically, like for example, I had a capoeirista on Friday. It's like, I've been training 3 days a week, but I can't do a full negativa because I feel like my knee is going to give out. I can't do punch because I don't have enough flexibility in my back. So based off of that information, I start to program like on a daily basis. You're going to do these mobility exercises, but you're going to do less on days that you train capoeira because you train so much. So
Yeah.
trying to help people figure out an amount of training that's not going to make them feel so sore that the next time they go into the roda, they're like, oh, I feel terrible.
I don't want to play. Yeah, I hate
Yeah.
it.
Yeah.
That's
But we still play. We still play anyway. It doesn't matter.
Man, I can't. It is funny because once you get into the hot, that you don't feel anything. All the adrenaline popping and blood popping, and then when you get out, you just like you feel like RoboCop. Everything starts falling apart.
Yeah.
Yeah. Cesar, you already went through the backgrounds of each of you guys, and then now let's see a little or talk a little bit about like injury prevention. And Julia, we mentioned before about like the pregnancy or like post pregnancy, right? So the ladies that want to come back into capoeira and they got pregnant and they want to come back to capoeira, and then maybe some of them have some issues. I don't remember my last pregnancy, but so I'm pretty sure there's a little bit issue in there for or troubles. I don't want to call it issue because it's the body adjusting back to the. But what do you think? Or what are your thoughts on that?
So there's a lot of stuff that happens during pregnancy and postpartum. I think the way that I talk about it with people who are pregnant and people who are newly postpartum is like your body has gone through a series of changes over a pretty long period of time. 9 months is a pretty long time. And then you can't expect that you're going to just like deliver and everything is going to go back to normal. The postpartum period is at least a year, and truly, once postpartum, always postpartum kind of. That doesn't mean you're going to feel 0% yourself for a whole year, but it takes time to feel like yourself again. So I like to give people that kind of expectation, and also understanding that it's not like it's not strange that you don't feel like yourself yet, because that's how it often is, and we just don't talk about it that way. Yeah, totally. So that's one thing. And then just we can talk about it in like different types of things you might experience or might see as a coach. But the big things are people, and this is going to also depend on the type of delivery you had, but your ability to connect with your pelvic floor muscles and your core is going to be different, because those muscles were either stretched over a long period of time or working really hard over a long period of time, and your positioning around them has changed. So 100%, relearning your pre-pregnancy like standing position is like a whole series of exercises you can do, because people feel super off balance. So that's one. Learning how to breathe the way you used to breathe before pregnancy is another. And then using those two things together to start understanding how to manage pressure in your trunk is a third really big thing. And then there's other stuff, elsewhere in the body, but I think fundamentally for almost everyone who is or has been pregnant, those things will probably need some addressing.
That's crazy, because I told this to everybody. The human body is just like amazing. He's just like, he finds the balance for whatever you have. He adjusts to whatever you do, and he's just amazing. Just the human body, and we can go by months talking about this. It's just really, really cool. And what do you think, Pardal? Do you have any knowledge on that? Any information about that?
I might have some information on breathing practices.
Probably about like any research you have done or anything like that.
No, I mean, I think Dr. Julia is more well-versed specifically how it pertains to postpartum, because she specializes in that area. But what I've come to realize, obviously, I think people focus on, and it's the hot word, like the core. I think since the 90s, people are always talking about the importance of the core and how it's always the problem, even if it's not the problem, that you have to work on your core in order to be strong. But I think breathing practices are one of the most undermined part of core training, where people just do heavy abdominal work when the diaphragm is a massive part of the core. Because if you think about if you visualize the body, I don't know if they're still teaching like this, but it's this cylindrical concept of the diaphragm and the pelvic floor making the top and bottom of a cylinder that's surrounded by your abdominals and the muscles in your back, and that is your core. And I would actually argue that muscles like your glutes, some could argue your hamstrings, also comprise your core. And that's 100%. What gives you the stability, and the stability is what you need in order to do a lot of the challenging movements. For example, like Aoud G cabeza. So you're doing a headstand. We do, because in my group we do a lot of ground movement.
Yeah.
And to do a movement like that, or to do a head spin from an Aoud, demands so much stability. So if you don't really know how to breathe, if you don't know how to brace your abdominals, you're either going to fail the movement, or your body could potentially fail you over time as you continue to do it.
Oh yeah. Nice. Yeah,
I would even go one step further with that cylinder model and take it to the mouth and the glottis, because this is where air comes in, right?
Yeah.
So, and if you think about all the groundwork that Dr. Jordan is talking about, if you're standing on your head and you don't have good stability and strength, even in the neck, which I think is part of the core too, then it's going to be really difficult for you to regulate like how air is getting in and out.
Yeah.
And also, if you think of like you're blowing up a balloon when you inhale, and this is the start of the balloon, I need to have access to the whole balloon, or there's going to be like a bend in it. And then the amount of tension on the different parts of the balloon will be different. Yeah. But I want the amount of tension to be the same.
Yeah. And then you need to work harder to get to the point.
Yes. It feels more challenging when you do it that way than if you can like efficiently use all of the stuff you have access to generate tension, then it's easier.
That's so crazy. I never thought about that. And then, I remember like a few years ago, you guys, or you at least Pardal, have you heard about Gugu Quilombola?
No.
On internet, he's big on social media, and the amount of body control that he has is freaking insane. And then one time I was with him on an event, and I was like, hey, what do you think are good exercises for me for my hips? And he was like, everything is connected. And he left me there. I was like, what do you mean, man? and then I started doing research, and that's when I came across to A.K.A Pardal. And I was like, that makes a lot of sense. That's what he meant about everything is connected. And then I really like that you said that the neck, and then it's connected to the core, and then everything's a machine that is just like it's hard for us to focus on one little thing. You have to work everything around.
Yeah, and I think it's important, because you can just look up breathing exercises, and usually they'll just have you sitting or lying down and practicing breathing and through your diaphragm. But is that going to translate when you're on your head? Not necessarily. So it's important to learn, and I think that's one thing Dr. Julia is an expert at, is cueing breathing in different functional positions. So I don't know if you saw the other day, she had me in a headstand for like 2 minutes and had me like breathe. And luckily I wasn't too red in the face, but it's because I actually have some understanding of my breath in that position. Now, if I had to do a full handstand for a minute and hold that, maybe it would be different because I'm not as good at them. Okay. But just understanding, like, now I'm upside down, my diaphragm is now contracting in a different manner versus when I'm on my side. So it's way more involved than people might think.
That's so crazy.
Also, like, from a pressure standpoint, right?
Yeah.
To go back to the pregnancy and postpartum population, if you think of your pelvic floor as the farthest out part of that balloon where we need to be able to generate appropriate tension, if you flip a person upside down, that part of the balloon is now like against gravity. So it's harder to actually engage with that in an inverted position. So you have to teach it right side up first. Like people have to be able to find that first, and then you can progress them towards increasing levels of difficulty of inversion so that they can achieve that in their floor work. Otherwise, it's super hard to connect with that in that upside down.
100%. Wow, that's crazy. I never thought about that either. And then this is actually extremely valuable information for those people that teach, because sometimes, you know, is this conception of capoeira is free, it's a beautiful art, free, and then you turn around and you see all the old generations, everybody is injured. And then no wonder why, because we've been doing it wrong the whole time. Wrong in the sense of, like, you know, the bad forms, people hunchback, or people don't exercise the right things. And by exercising doesn't mean going to the gym. Just like, you know, doing the proper form for us to actually have actually long time in this art form. Pardal, I remember you have some questions there for especially about like the pregnancy points. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, we had a ton of stuff for Dr. Julia. I think we already hit on. I wanted to definitely make sure that we discussed what the core was, because I think that's a term that's just loosely thrown around, and I think I didn't even think about the muscles in the neck and throat area, and so that was a good adjustment there by Dr. Julia. But I guess what I would ask Dr. Julia is, if someone is returning to capoeira after a year is off, what would be like the main entry points or things that you would want to address with them before, like, I guess if they could self-assess their readiness to return?
Yeah, I think you know, you can, if you look at some of the like common features of a lot of the capoeira movements, it's like you want to be able to feel really comfortable in a deep squat. You want to be able to feel really comfortable in a handstand, even if you can't hold it for that long yet, you can build that strength back up, but your body should feel solid there. You want to be, or a headstand if you're like gonna do some more stuff with your head on the ground first and then transition. You want to, I think foot flexibility and foot stability is a big thing for people to pay attention to, just having watched a lot of the capoeira movements and like seeing all of the toe extension that is necessary for a lot of those positions. So even just a simple check, like, can I sit on my heels without pain? Can I sit on one heel at a time without pain? Can I stand on my one foot on my toes without and feel steady there? All of that kind of stuff I think would be really helpful. And a lot of times people postpartum have a lot of tightness in the feet. So it's an important way for them to be able to A, check their mobility there, and then B, check their stability there.
That's amazing. It's crazy how through the feet, and again, everything is connected. The feet helps so much for the stability there. I never thought about the toes flexibility. That's awesome.
Yeah. And it's also like a lot of times you'll hear people who are pregnant or have been pregnant say that they have plantar fasciitis, like that heel pain in both feet, and it's almost never actually that. So if they're experiencing that, that's a good sign that they need to start working like basically the mobility of their nerves and the nervous system all the way up, because that system tends to shorten during pregnancy, both because of like habitual posturing during pregnancy, and then also because the nervous system is so taxed during that time.
That's so crazy. And by you saying all the way up is from the feet all the way to the neck?
Yeah.
Oh, okay, cool. Pardal, anything else? What else?
Yeah. One of the concepts we hit on when we were working together was rib stacking. I don't know if that's a concept. I want to try and keep the terminology relatively like digestible for the general public, because I could use fancy anatomical terms all day long. But could you just like bare bones, like what is the concept of rib stacking and its importance in capoeira be?
Yeah, so this kind of goes back to what we were talking about the core and how it works, and that balloon analogy that I gave. So if you think of it as like you're trying to create a balloon where you can put even tension on all of the stretchy parts of the balloon. And because of that, I want to be able to find the position where my rib cage is immediately above my pelvis. Because then when air comes in, everything can expand together. And that is going to be like the maximal efficiency position. Obviously, if you're going to be, playing and you're going to be rolling around and all kinds of stuff, you're going to be in other positions. But the more you have the ability to like experience that stack and practice that efficient position, the more you'll be able to translate that into positions where different parts of that structure is on more tension or less tension.
I see. That's so cool.
Yeah. And I think one more thing I definitely want to ask. I don't know if some people have the awareness that they're not breathing through their diaphragms properly, especially when we play a really intense game. We're not doing like in through our nose, out through our mouth. It's like we're using all the muscles in our neck to get as much air in as we can, because we're, if you have like, not necessarily a jogo duro, but you have a pretty fast game and you're playing often. But sometimes in the beginning, people are just chest breathers and they're not really using their diaphragm. So I guess my question to Dr. Julia would be, if on assessment someone seems like they're adopting more of a chest breathing pattern, what is like maybe like the first thing you'd have them address, like which position you'd put them in, how would you cue them, just in case one of our listeners realizes that they're having some trouble with that?
Yeah.
I like that.
So the more support you have on your body, the easier it is to find some of these things. So the easiest position to re-engage with some of this is going to be laying on your back, because you're supported by the floor and there's no gravity. So you're like laying flat. Gravity isn't affecting how air is getting in and out of your body as much.
Oh, nice.
So
okay.
That's the first. If somebody's really struggling and having a hard time, I will put them in that position. And what I will have them do is basically put one hand very relaxed somewhere on their chest, and one very relaxed somewhere on their abdomen. And it could be off to the side so the elbows can be relaxed. But all I want them to focus on is breathing normal size breaths so that both hands rise and fall at the same time. Both hands should rise when you breathe in, and both hands should fall when you breathe out. And I don't want that like super, super big inhale, because it's going to make things feel and look funny. But I want them to just like breathe normal volume breaths and see if they can establish that pattern. Because like I said, to go back to the balloon, right? Everything should expand at the same time.
Yeah.
So then if they can do that laying on their back, you can transition them to sitting, which is also supported because you have something under your hips, something behind your back. You have a little more structure around you, but now gravity is there. And then you can transition that to standing. Same thing. You have them put one hand on the ribs and front of the ribs, and one hand on the stomach. And then you can make them, once they can start to feel that, you can have them do it in standing. I have them do it in standing with a load in front of them. So I have them hold a kettlebell out in front of them and see if they can make that happen with like the introduction of having to work against a load.
Yeah.
And then you can start transitioning them towards inversion if that's the goal. So you can go hands and knees. You can go like a down dog position, or like like the beginning of a headstand all the way into a handstand.
That's awesome. That's a really cool tip, especially for those new in capoeira. They never done handstands and things like that, and to go from all the way lay down all the way to their hands, which is totally upside down. That's really cool. That's a really, really nice. And then, thank you, Pardal. Those were really good questions. Actually, those are pretty good tips for anyone listening for capoeiristas. And if you are not capoeiristas, and you need stabilization of your core, or stability in your core, this actually very, very cool information right there. And then now we talk about the body. Now let's talk about everything like outside of the body, right? So for example, like stress, anxiety. Well, anxiety will be inside the body, right? But now like any other factor that can potentially affect the body, or anything in the body. Well, what do you think about that, Julia?
So I think, for new parents, that's definitely going to be a factor. Now you have a baby that you have to care for. You may or may not be sleeping.
Yeah.
You may or may not be eating enough, or you may or may not be getting nutritious foods because the baby is eating mashed carrots and so are you. It's just, there's people lose the ability and the time to take care of themselves for a period of time. And so when you're going to go back to a high level of sport, making sure that you also have the infrastructure in your life for recovery is really important. And recovery means eating enough, eating nutritious foods, sleeping enough, hopefully, where you can, right? I'm not saying never exercise until you can get 8 hours of sleep a night again, because that's not realistic.
The next 10 years, I believe.
Right. But somehow being able to get into a calming state enough sometimes, so that your body has opportunities to recover. And then I'll also say, especially in people who are postpartum, the hormonal shift that happens during pregnancy is elongated by the breastfeeding period. So if you are breastfeeding, your body is going to stay in a lower estrogen state throughout your breastfeeding period of time. And that's going to affect your ability, the resiliency of your tendons, your ability to build muscle mass, all of that stuff, your fatigue levels, potentially even your response to insulin and carb intake. So there's a lot of factors that are going on a systemic body level that might mean that your return to exercise should be eased so that your body has an opportunity to adjust to all of that new input, because it's still really transitioning out of that pregnancy status.
Yeah. And it's cool to see the progress of that too, where people actually learn how to manage that and come back to capoeira, because I bet it's very stressful for the body to go through all that stuff, all that process, and it's not easy. It's not going to be an easy process, but it is possible, because I have many friends that they came back after pregnancy. They come back to capoeira, and then it's cool to see that process. And I even seen 9 months pregnant friends all the way up on handstands. I was like, dude, what are you doing? You crazy.
Well, you're listen, do I want a 9-month pregnant person doing a handstand? She might be strong enough, but she could fall, and that would be bad.
Yes.
So, there is a certain level of the safety of you and the baby at a certain 100%. Point. Yeah. But that being said, I've worked with pregnant athletes who are lifting barbells up until the very end of their pregnancy. And the reality is that people who have some kind of strength training practice throughout pregnancy do better in the postpartum period. Yeah. And even throughout their pregnancy, it helps alleviate back pain. It helps with potentially with gestational diabetes, if that's something that a person is dealing with. So I'm not going to tell people not to do things. I just want to make sure that they're not fighting through something, because that is ultimately going to negatively affect them, versus 100%. Engaging in exercise because it makes them feel good and feel strong, both in pregnancy and postpartum.
Yeah, for sure. But now, what do you think about the stress, anxiety, and these kind of things that affect the body, and then for the things that you specific work with?
You mean specifically in terms of being a capoeirista, or just the general population?
Just in general population.
Yeah, a lot of, I can speak, I think Julia and I can both speak about just our environment being an incredibly stressful place. We're here in New York City, where everything is moving very quickly, and we're both entrepreneurs. so we're always working towards something. So I think it takes a lot of active management of ourselves to make sure that we can continue to serve all the people that we love helping. But it just, some people either don't have the time or haven't come across the resources to manage their stress in a healthy manner, and that's why like they write many songs about how we just drink to forget all these things, and those are unhealthy practices to cope with stress. Where capoeira is like a drug. It is like a drug,
Yeah, it
and
is. Yeah.
that's why I love it so much. It's like, and that's why I would now.
Not
You might
promoting drugs.
persist through. We're not promoting drugs, absolutely not.
Yeah, it's funny.
But you might persist through a physical injury because it's such a stress relief, and then you might get hurt in the process. It's like one of those things that it's neither here nor there, but it's like a cycle of, stress management. And like Dr. Julia was saying, you have to have a capacity to perform always, and not managing stress or having like persistent negative thoughts, not sleeping well, is all going to diminish your capacity to perform in capoeira. So if you've been absent for either postpartum or you just taken many years off from capoeira, you are not going to be able to make it through a class without I mean, unless your conditioning has been stabilized to a certain degree. Most people who come back to my class after years off are gassed. They might be able to play like one game in the Hoda, and then they sit and watch the rest of the time because they're just it's not something you can just. I took a week and a half off earlier this year, and I had trouble readjusting to the Hoda. So.
Yeah.
But I mean,
go ahead.
No, go ahead.
Go ahead.
No, I'm just saying, like, life is stressful. I get it.
Yeah.
And especially like even in capoeira, like we have to practice berimbau, we have to practice songs, we have to practice techniques. So aside from all the other things that are important to us and we have to do in our lives, capoeira is beautiful, but it also demands a lot of our time and energy. So being able to, I had to come to a point even with capoeira where I'm like, I'm doing my best. I practice my instruments every now and then, but it's not like I have to do it every day because it's just not feasible.
Totally.
I think it's not sustainable.
Yeah.
In my opinion, for me.
And I like that the point that you take the especially the singing part, because breathing is super important during the singing part, and it's just like it's just another topic that we can touch base, but it's very important for us to learn how to breathe. There's points where I've been singing in the Hada, and it's just like to come back, and then because it's a back to back, and then it is because it's so fast, and then sometimes I get like, man, I can. It's back. It's hard for me to come back to this because it's just like I'm not breathing enough and breathing correctly for me to recover in that singing process.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think anyone who doesn't do capoeira can appreciate just like the energy and what it does to you, and you start to forget all the things that you should be doing. You kind of just get lost in it, and you're like trying to hit a note that you can't normally hit, and you're just like, and then I get my professor looking at me, and he's like,
yes. Yeah, switch it up. Nice. Yeah. And then it's really cool to learn how to manage all the stress part of and outside of capoeira too, because that's definitely going to affect your performance, your work, and everything's connected, right? And then it will help you a lot to learn how to control all those some things that we can't control, but of course try to control everything that you can control, and then that will help you to perform better whatever you do.
I think also just like things to look out for that might be a sign that you maybe need to take a little bit of a step back, or like manage how far you're pushing yourself is important too. Like specific to the postpartum period, a lot of times people are very focused on like getting their core back. Like that's a big focus for a lot of people aesthetically, and then also just like in terms of how they feel. But if you are like really pushing yourself beyond the place where your nervous system is like ready to handle that level of exercise, you can actually bloat, because it's gonna affect your GI system. That level of stress affects your GI system, which is, we don't have to get into like all of the connections between the brain and the gut, but basically like your gut is a reflection of what's going on in your brain and vice versa. So if you are pushing yourself past the point where your body is like ready for that level of exertion, sometimes you'll see bloating either like in the couple of hours after or even the next day. And people think, oh, my core is like getting worse, or like I've lost progress on that. But actually it's just their gut is taking up more space because there's like inflammation and swelling there in response to that level of exertion.
Yeah.
So that if you're experiencing that, or like you do capoeira and then the next day you just like can't do anything, you're like crashed out for the whole next day, or even like later that night, like all of that is a sign that you are like overwhelming your nervous system and not
100%.
recovering well from what you're trying to do. So if you do need to like play one round and like sit for the rest
Yeah.
of the time, fine. Like if that's
Yeah.
where you're starting,
Yeah.
fine. Just like give yourself the freedom to do that so that you can actually play 2, play 3, whatever in the future.
Yeah, because and then that's going to compound, right? And then it becomes worse and worse and worse, and then it comes with the famous saying of, you know, listen to your body, you know, and then and sometimes we just get caught up with excitement, and we just we just get too excited, and then be like, why this hurts, and then, you know, I don't feel that good.
Totally.
Yeah. What do you think, Pardal?
No, I mean, she's spot on, and I think that was a good point making with the GI. And I know from personal experience, even just anecdotally, that, you know, in times that I'm stressed, you start feeling something like, because sometimes you may think you have some sort of like muscular pain, but it's like a manifestation of your brain in your gut. So it's like, I remember I went to the doctor like 6 years ago because I was having some pain like right underneath my rib, and, you know, I would try to release my diaphragm and all that stuff, and it wasn't working. And, you know, they just gave me like regular GI stuff, but I realized that it had everything to do with me being anxious about something that was going on in my life at the time. And once I felt better about that, I realized that the pain subsided.
That's crazy.
So I that was an amazing point.
Yeah. So it's you had the reflection of stress somewhere, like trapped there in your body.
Yeah. I mean, the beauty of me getting hurt often is that I can appreciate the experience that all capoeiristas and people go through, and it helps me better advise people, because obviously you want to take evidence into consideration, but there's a lot of value in personal experience. So when someone says, oh, I pulled this muscle doing this movement, I'm like, yeah, so have I. I've done that. Especially as a new capoeirista, when you're breaking your body, and like to do a meia lua de compasso requires so much torque in your hip, to do negativa repeat. So the area in your brain responsible for understanding whether or not your hip should be in that position, it's still being developed. So there's going to be a response, because that type of movement is relatively foreign still as you're learning.
Yeah.
So it's more than just like, oh, I'm sore because I did a lot of training. It's like your body just still it's trying to figure out whether it should go there or not. Like, should the ligaments be stretched to a certain degree?
Yeah.
And that's part of the either returning to capoeira after being out for a while, or just being in the beginning stages and learning the movements.
Which is a lot of learning, because it's just so many out of nowhere. I don't know how to explain it. It's just like, it's not a normal movement, and then for just the human body, right? And then we just move completely different, and we just move out of different angles.
Yeah, but apparently it keeps us looking younger, because everyone thought I was like 5 years younger than I am. Because they asked us around. I was hanging out with my group after we did a demo yesterday, and we were all hanging out, and someone's like, I thought you were like 26. I was like, me? Nah. I'm in my 30s, man. Relax. Like, but it's crazy. You say
the
like,
answer to that is always thank you.
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
Don't tell them the real age.
Yeah. But it's like, you see mestres and stuff too in their 60s. I'm like, what? No way. Like,
yeah, man. Yeah.
Like, they can take me out still in their 60s or 70s with the blindfolded, hands behind their back. But it's like, yes, capoeira's movements are second to none. I don't think you can compare. But I think, going back to Dr. Julia's point about having movement options, I think exposing our bodies to these sorts of positions will allow us in life, if we're, for example, I always go back to doing things like I don't know, you're on a hike and you slip on a rock and it's slippery and your leg goes like all the way out. Like think about slipping on a banana peel. It's like with the amount of rasteiras and quechadas we do, our legs will probably be able to withstand that without pulling our groin.
Yeah.
So it allows us to adapt to any unpredictable life situation that might cause bodily harm or injury. So there is a lot of value in, you know, going back to Ido Portal and his exposure to different movement patterns under different, there's like, it's so complex, the amount of training you have to do, like time under tension, the speed of movement. And that's the thing in capoeira as well. It's like stretching does not address most of those things other than just like lengthening a tissue over time. And it's usually not lengthening the area that you want. And if you don't do it repeatedly, you're not going to have long-term gains in range of motion anyway. So you're just stretching for no reason. But we have to throw kicks quickly. So just stretching is not going to do it. Doing movement under different tempos, under different amounts of load, that is what is going to keep us from getting hurt. And that might be for another podcast day, but... that's an important point.
I also think that what you're saying about like telling the brain, like the brain getting accustomed to how far a tissue is going to be allowed to go, that's something that like you think you're going to be able to just like jump in and do something after never having done it, but your body needs time to like slowly adjust to that level of stress on the tissue, not like, you know, emotional stress or whatever, but how much each individual tissue is getting stressed. So you know, if you like have a bent leg in something instead of like getting the leg all the way straight, that's the goal. Shouldn't be like tomorrow my leg's gonna get straight. The goal should be like I'm gonna get like a little bit further with that every time. And ultimately flexibility is usually a strength thing because you have to have the strength to get yourself all the way into that position and then to support yourself in that position. So if you don't have the strength that accompanies that mobility, then that's how you get hurt. Like those like loosey-goosey people, those are the people who are going to get hurt the fastest because they can get into those positions the easiest, but they can't support themselves there.
Because they don't have the strength to like the muscle strength to support.
So when I'm trying to work on somebody who like needs to improve mobility, I always do it under load because weights are feedback. So I want them to like feel what it feels like to get into that position and then have to stay at a place where they can still support that outside load, that outside stimulus. 100%. Otherwise they won't be able to like keep that gain.
That's crazy. It's crazy because you know the typical workout is like lift heavy and then just go to a gym and get buff, and then you have, you know, so many injuries when you come to capoeira.
That's not a typical workout if you're working with me.
you have them like just like it's crazy. It's just like.
I mean, don't get me wrong. You're gonna lift heavy stuff. Like that's I love to make people do that, and I love to do it myself. But if your goal is to like improve your flexibility and stability, you need to work with loads that you can handle at end range.
That's so cool. It's definitely something that I need to practice because he's from so many years of doing capoeira and then doing it the wrong way, and then now I feel. And then now understanding how the body actually works and all these kind of information that definitely helps a lot. And then to wrap it up with this topic, what would be the like hips for tight hips? Because that's another issue in capoeira. A lot of people has tight hips. Since capoeira, the main point of gravity is on the hips. Well, I guess for the human body, just in general, is on the hips. But the hips is such an important thing for us. What do you think? Let's start with Pardal. What do you think, Pardal? For tight hips?
Yeah, I think, well, first of all, it depends on whether it's more of a flex position. So if we're talking about going into, you know, I think some groups call it like esquiva baixa. We call it esquiva de frente. Or we're talking about a meia lua de compasso, so that's more of a hip flex position. So repeated exposure to that is helpful, but doing it, it's like if you do it too often, it's going to be sore. But if you gradually do it like day to day, like expose your hips. So for example, there's a stretch I like to give people called the Spider-Man stretch, where you're putting your hip in that position. And if you do that daily, your body's gonna understand that it's something it should be doing. So when you're doing like Schiva de French or Melu di Compasso, you're likely not going to feel residual tightness because it's something that you do all the time. Now you can also feel tightness doing something like a martello or a queixada, where your hip's not opening as much. So I would train that a little bit differently. And I would also, but I find that those injuries happen more in the initial stages of learning. Like for example, when I started learning martellos, my feet weren't pivoting enough to actually allow my leg to fully extend. So I was trying to just whip my leg around with my hip and my hip flexors and my obliques, when if I just position my foot in a more advantageous position, I can extend my kick without overusing my hip.
And you have more power there too.
And you have more power because, I mean, it's very technical. It's like it's your arms, it's your obliques, you know. But so I think as long as you address the technicalities and the technique is solid, then it's just a matter of making sure that there's a concept, I think it's still pretty common about training spikes, where if you do 50 martellos on one day and then you go the rest of the week without doing any sort of exposure, like it's gonna feel tight the next time you do it, because
for sure
your body's just it's like a shock to your system that this movement pattern, these tissues are being exercised to this degree. So it's like even when I'm outside of the Roda, I'm in the gym doing mobility work for my hips, and sometimes I'll take a kettlebell, I'll do like some arm bars, I'll do I do like this 90-90 one where I'm holding kettlebells here at chest height and I let my knees go from side to side just to work on active internal external rotation. So I have videos on all of this if people want to check my Instagram. But it not only just feels good working against load, because I actually feel like using load targets the joint capsule even better, and it helps you stabilize your whole core and your upper. It connects your upper and lower quarter even better when you hold something like a kettlebell. If you couldn't tell, Julia likes kettlebells. You could see the rack behind her in her home. But that's the thing. It's like loading stretches, doing loaded stretches, which you can call it strengthening, you can call it loaded stretches. At the end of the day, you're getting more neural feedback to that specific joint. So
I like that.
If you do something heavy and then you do it without weight, it's gonna feel amazing.
Yeah, for sure. Because
you've already prepared your body to do something heavier, so that when you then those martellos
just go like a knife, but cutting butter. What are your thoughts, Julia?
I would agree on the loaded mobility stuff. I think part of what happens when you load a mobility exercise is that you challenge all of the dynamic stability around your joint to help you maintain that end range position, so that when you are doing that kick, you know, you what you need when that happens is like everything that supports the thigh bone into the socket, basically, to be able to control how that is going to move.
So crazy. Okay.
So if I can stimulate that by loading myself at end range, it's going to improve my mobility, because it's going to improve my joint's ability to be supported in that position. So I'm like a big fan of loaded mobility, and kettlebells are a fantastic tool for that. The other thing I'll say too about mobility and like tightness is that usually if you have tightness on both sides of your body consistently because of a movement, that muscle group is weak. Like usually tightness is often a weakness problem. And I saw this when I was working with professional dancers all the time, because they would tell me their hamstrings felt super, super tight. And I would say, okay, show me how far you can get to the floor. And they can get like their entire palm and more to the floor. So that is not a tight hamstring. That person has great hamstring flexibility, but it feels tight because they're trying to do all of these end range motions, and they're not using those muscles efficiently in those end range positions.
So
and
crazy. Okay.
and so there's like a weakness there versus like a lack of flexibility.
Crazy. So and then the other thing too, that a lot of people think that flexibility means strengthen the muscle, right? Because the more I stretch, the more I stretch, the more I can hold this position, right? And then I can reach better to this position. And I see Pardal disagreeing with that, but it's a myth in capoeira. And then a lot of people say, like, I need to, like you said at the beginning, Pardal, it's just like I need to stretch more so I can do better martelos. It's just like, no.
No, I just
you
have
need
bad.
to like put your foot on something really high up and try to lift it off of that thing. That's what you need to do.
That's that. Oh, Pardal has a video about that. Yeah.
Yeah,
There's a lot of crossover with dance, so like it makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
Because again, it's like what Dr. Julia is saying. It's like we're working. What are the positions of the body in which our tissues are likely going to fail us? It's not here, like we're pretty safe here. It's when we're fully extended. So you have to train, and there are different levels of control to master. Like if you don't have the range of motion, we have to acquire the range of motion first, whether it's doing what we call a PNF exercise to gain the range of motion and allow the tissues, meaning like the muscles and the ligaments and all the nerve tissue in there, to relax so that we can acquire that. And then once you have full range of motion, then you can challenge it doing more like what we call eccentric work, where you do very slow contractions over time and then loading it on top of that. So there are layers of building every tissue provides feedback to our brain, and then vice versa, our brain to our tissues. So that was a great example. Like if I were to do a martello and I wanted to get it higher, I could just put my leg on an elevated surface. Obviously make sure that my toes are pointed. I don't want to cheat by doing this and pointing my toes towards my face, because that's not the right technique. And then make sure that you're stabilizing your stance leg, and then just lift up and down in a small range of motion, and then progressively add more and more height. So that's stretching, but it's stretching under relative load versus just like holding it there and sinking into it. You take it off, you feel terrible because you stretched it past its limits, and it's certainly not something you should do. If you did want to stretch and stretching was something that felt good to you, certainly not something you should be doing before you play. So what I like in my group is that we warm up with the capoeira movements. Like we'll just do ginga, esquiva, some fintras to really warm up the movement patterns. But we don't do any static stretching before class, and I'm really grateful for that. I go back to my high school athletics when we were doing a bunch of stretching, and these coaches who had no idea what the heck they were talking about. And like I think about like my first experiences in gyms, and I'm like, oh man! But
what did I do?
that was so common, and I wouldn't be shocked if some programs are still, on the field doing regular stretches. Like such a waste of time. And potentially putting athletes that do more high-level, high-intensity exercise at risk for injury. And then they'll just be like, well, okay, you hurt yourself, stretch. So I remember someone in my group, someone in my group who had come back from a 3-year absence from capoeira was training one day, and he caught a cramp in his calf. And I remember somebody who was very well-intentioned went over to stretch his calf, and I was like, let me just like move it actively, like drew a small range of motion in which he can tolerate. So because if you stretch something, like you say, if you think of a rubber band, you're only really stretching one piece. Even though the outsides are stretching, the inside doesn't stretch that much. So when you think about stretching a muscle, you're really not accomplishing much anyway, except seeing someone in agony, and you're like, no, I need this. It hurts good. It's like, because it feeds into the beliefs that stretching is helpful.
Yeah, that's true.
But we need to put that to bed. It's 2022. We're better informed now, and that's why Dr. Julia and I are out here, because there's too much evidence to support resistance training in injury prevention, quality of life. Stretching only has a relatively small place, and for capoeiristas, it's not what we need to be sustainable.
Yeah, 100%. And I really love this topic. And again, we can go for hours and days talking about the human body, right? In just specific points, we can we can do hours of podcast. But this on a general point is very very helpful for the capoeira community, and for anyone out there that wants to not only focus on capoeira, because is you also do some like cross training and to get stronger at capoeira. If you're gonna get strong at capoeira, do something outside of capoeira. It's just one thing is not gonna get you stronger. So it's better to get exposed to many different things so you can actually feel better. And yeah, I'm very happy to have you guys here. And then we definitely need to probably at some point be specific on one little thing, and we can probably talk about it and do some information. And what are your social medias again, so people can follow you there, and then they can subscribe or do some of your trainings. Ladies first, Julia, what is your?
I am at empower_physical_therapy.
Nice.
There's a link to my website in my bio, but my website is www.empowerpt.nyc.
Nice. And I'll put all this information in the description of the podcast. What are you, Pardal?
I am at dr.jordanceda on Instagram, TikTok, Facebook as well. By the way, if you're a tourist in New York City and you go to Dumbo, there's one street where it's like a bunch of bricks and there's a bridge in the background where you see a bunch of influencers taking pictures. If you're in that area, go visit Dr. Julia because her office is literally right there.
Oh, cool. Nice. Okay, perfect.
You've probably seen it on Instagram.
I'm pretty sure we have. That's pretty cool. Well, guys, thank you so much. I'm very happy to have you here and get all these really, really cool information, super valuable information for a human body and just for everybody out there, especially the ladies that want to come back after pregnancy. Is very, very helpful.
Absolutely.
Okay. Talk to you guys next time, and definitely let's do it again.
Até já.
I'll see you guys.
Até já. Prazer pra você.
Hey, thank you so much for listening. Thank you so much for being part of this episode one more time. And thank you so much for being part of the Capoeira community. I'm very happy you made it all the way to the end. Now, make sure you listen to the next episode next week or the following week or the previous episodes. And don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel. And don't forget to follow us on Instagram. And don't forget to reach out so we can have you on the podcast. Okay, thank you so much for being part of this amazing journey in the Capoeira community. And I really, really hope to see you one time here in Indianapolis, or I'll see you in the Hada next time. Okay, keep training, keep your Capoeira school, keep supporting your Capoeira school, and keep training, keep loving Capoeira, keep training, keep playing the Hada. I'll see you in the Hada next time. Peace.